This is Joan with the Joan Yurkovich Show at 910 KINA Salina, bringing you innovative talk radio that surprises, entertains, and sometimes informs you. Today my guest is Stephanie Mott. She calls herself a Christian transgender person who has a very interesting role as the executive director with K-STEP, which is called the Kansas Statewide Transgender Education Project. Welcome, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this is a sort of a new project or a new thing that you're trying to get set up to educate people about transgender people and also trying to get some nonprofit status. Tell us about when that started and where you're at with that.
Okay. K-STEP started in August of 2010, and we incorporated actually right here in Salinas where we had our organizing meeting. And about 15 people from across the state got together and decided this is something that we needed to do. Since then, we've done over 70 presentations across the state.
Do you have people working with you at your organization?
We're an all-volunteer organization, and everybody just chips in, and we support ourselves because we don't have that 501c3 status just yet, but we're working on that.
What are the prospects of that? Do you think that'll be coming soon, or?
I'm hoping by the end of the year that we'll be able to have that.
Well, that'll be good. About a year out before, it takes about a year to get that all processed.
It does take quite a while.
Right, right. And of interest, when we talk about transgender and you're out there providing education to the public, I wanted to ask you to define some words before we really get into more of an interview. Define transgender, there's transsexual, there's bigender, dual gender. Just get us started off, kind of telling us the background of those terms.
Okay, well, transgender is any time anyone identifies enough with a gender opposite their biological birth sex that they have to express themselves as that gender. Operative words there are have to, not choose to, and as, not like. So if somebody dresses like a guy, a biological woman dresses like a guy, she's probably not transgender. If she dresses as a guy, she probably is, if she's presenting as a guy. Transsexual is a person like me. I'm transsexual, and that's part of the umbrella of transgender. And I need to live in the gender of opposite my biological birth sex in order for me to be okay.
Well, and then let me assume then that a big component to that might be choosing to take like hormone therapy to change your male, because you were born male and now you're female, but you've taken the female hormones for some time to change your appearance. And I was commenting when you came in what beautiful feminine hands you have. I'm kind of jealous of those hands of yours, Stephanie. And I think you felt that was a nice compliment, yes, because you certainly, yes, as feeling inside as a woman, want to be perceived by the public as that. So let's go back to when you were a little boy or girl in your mind. Tell us how that starts.
Well, the first thing I remember knowing about myself is that I was a little girl, but I'd been born into a boy's body. Very much I identified with being like my sisters and not being like my brothers on the inside. But on the outside, obviously, I was like my brothers, but not like my sisters.
So you just always had this knowing that you were a little girl. It's like, when you had a consciousness of am I a boy or a girl, you knew you were a little girl.
I did.
And how were you able to express that, or what sort of confusion and just knowing that you're about my age, that was certainly not the time or the generation for that, for open expression.
Well, I say the first thing I remember knowing is that I was a girl. The second thing I remember knowing is that I couldn't talk about it. Then if I was going to be able to survive in my family and in society, that I would have to pretend to be a little boy. And if I wanted to express myself as a little girl, I would have to do it literally in the shadows and in the, where there were never any people like that.
And you had probably a driving need to do that, to borrow your sister's clothes, maybe, or were you even playing with makeup? And
absolutely, some with makeup. But yeah, I borrowed my sister's clothes. From the time I was 6 or 7 years old, I would find a secluded place on the little farm that we grew up on, and hide, but always hiding whenever I was presenting myself as who I am.
Was part of that some of expressed sort of in play? Like, did you
Yeah.
play more with dolls or play more with more traditional female things?
It would have been unacceptable for me to play with the toys that were generally accepted as being toys that were for girls. And of course, this was in the 1960s. But,
so even your secret self would never go off and pretend to be a girl playing like a girl?
No, I
Not so
really
much.
didn't have the toys or anything
Yeah.
to do the play acting part. It was just dressing and feeling like a girl under the covers at night or on some secluded place.
So you'd go to bed at night, and were you tormented most nights feeling, that...
Yeah,
were you in your own private space able to say, I'm a woman, I'm a girl?
I'm a girl. Yeah, I knew that.
But then all the other times where other people were around, you had to be something you didn't feel that you were.
Exactly. I also have to say that I was blessed to be born into a very loving household. And so in spite of the fact that I had this torment going on where I wasn't able to be who I am, my mom is the basis for anything I know about unconditional love. She just was an amazing woman. And my dad was a typical dad for the 1960s, but a very great provider and, kind of hard, but a good man.
And how blessed to have that, because I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that's probably one of the driving forces with your organization is to help those who don't have that family support.
Oh, exactly.
And we can know that, sometimes that can be pretty traumatic. And we can maybe come back and talk a little more about that, but I'm very interested in what you know because you have a wealth of information about the biology of this. Tell us how this happens. How does this develop?
Well, biological sex and gender identity are not set at the same time in the womb. As, biological sex is set pretty much at conception when you either get an X and an X or an X and a Y for the vast majority of people. And gender identity is set about at 6 weeks in the womb, and it has a lot to do with hormone levels that the mom has at the same time. There's actually an area in our brains called the hypothalamus, and this is the area that they have identified as being responsible for gender identity. My hypothalamus is almost exactly like that of a biological woman who identifies as a woman, and not at all like that of a biological male who identifies as a male.
Have you been able to actually have MRIs or CAT scans or something to show you that? Is there a scientific proof for this that can get the disbelievers to believe?
There is scientific studies that have been done, and nothing that has been done for me, but there are a number of scientific studies. The problem is getting the disbelievers to believe what they don't want to believe.
Absolutely. And I think as you identify yourself, as we said, as a Christian transgender person, then you've got a big hill to climb right there. In the fact that, that's sometimes the most challenging part of it is how do I identify who I really am or resolve that with this Christian faith. And certainly, is that kind of the faction of people? Are the real religious the faction that seem less accepting, or do you see this all across the board? Doesn't matter.
I'm not. I don't want to put the emphasis for the disbelief on religion itself, because it's really not about religion in general. There are a lot of people of great faith who understand that God creates a wonderful, beautiful diversity for all of us to experience, and actually that by failing to embrace that diversity, we fail to embrace the diversity of God. But there are a lot of people who, for reasons that I have a hard time understanding, believe that God only creates very limited people who are like us, and so there are denominations that are more accepting. There are denominations that tend to be less accepting, but religion in and of itself is not really the problem. It's the way people use religion to put people down. And Christianity, and pretty much all religion, is for lifting people up, not for putting people down.
Well, and I kind of wanted your opinion about that, because if our listeners stay tuned to our next guest, one of her big missions in life is to have her religious community accept the fact that she does have a gay child. And so I just wanted to throw that little piece of that in there. But now as we go back to talking about being a transgender, it's identifying with, transsexual is making that actual choice, I would think, to take hormones, make something more definitive than just
it's about
maybe dressing as, or
it's about making the choice that you need to live as the gender opposite your biological birth sex.
And again, when you say that, what does that actually mean?
Well, not everybody takes hormones.
Okay.
Not everybody has surgeries, and well, first off, surgeries are financially difficult because the gender affirmation surgery that would allow me to have that physical body completely of a woman costs around $20,000, and of course is not covered by insurance, even though a doctor says it's medically necessary.
Oh, so there's a little bias among people in the insurance industry, and I read about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much is bias and how much
You've never
is
heard,
money.
well, you've just never heard,
Yeah.
well, yeah, there you go.
It's
You've never
probably
heard of
about
an
money.
insurance company paying for this,
Well,
even if
yeah.
a doctor or even a psychologist
No,
or psychiatrist.
actually, there are places where that's beginning to change, and there are actually a lot of companies where that's beginning to change. And the Human Rights Campaign has a corporate equality index that is set up to judge how well the different corporations work within the LGBT community in providing insurance and discrimination policies and such.
And you threw something out,
LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender.
I always get those, I know what that is, but I always get a couple of them confused or mixed up there,
Yeah.
so. And are you involved with that group as well, or you're just sort of a?
I am. Well, I'm involved in social justice, and you know, I think it's important for me to understand it's not just about what I need, but about what humanity needs. And so anytime that somebody is marginalized or disenfranchised, then that needs to be something that I'm working on. I am a member of the Topeka Shawnee County Homeless Task Force. And I volunteer at the Center for Safety and Empowerment at the YWCA. That used to be the Battered Women Task Force. And so I try to stay in, I volunteer at the Shawnee County Jail. But I'm also the state vice chair for Kansas Equality Coalition, which is a political action organization, has 11 chapters throughout the state of Kansas that works for political change. K-STEP works for education, and because I think both parts are really important, and Kansas Equality Coalition works for political change throughout the state.
So you have quite a repertoire there of activist and social issues that you participate in. And we're going to have to go to a little bit of a break here, Stephanie, and I want to tell our listeners to be sure and stay tuned again, because we'll be back with more from Stephanie, and we're also going to be coming in with our mother, who's telling us about her journey having had a gay son, or having a gay son. And this is Joan on the Joan Yurkovich Show, and be sure to go to our video outtakes and podcasting and our link to iTunes, and that's found on joanyurkovich.com. This is the Joan Yurkovich Show on 910 KINA Salina. Well, Stephanie, it's really interesting to hear you talk about, as a young person growing up with this feeling, and knowing that you're a woman, but yet, or a girl, and having to live in this body of a boy. So I know you have a wealth of knowledge and information. Can you tell us some of, the biology and science that validates, what you've been living?
Yeah, biological sex and gender identity are not set at the same time in the womb. Biological sex is pretty much set at conception, and either you get an X and an X chromosome, or you get an X and a Y chromosome, and there are some variations that are very rare. But gender identity is set at about 6 weeks, and it has a lot to do with the hormone levels in the mom during that particular time when gender identity is being set. There's an area in the brain called the hypothalamus, and that's the area that's been identified as being responsible for gender identity in human beings. And my hypothalamus looks pretty much like that of a biological woman who identifies as a woman, and not like that of a biological male who identifies as a male. In other words, I have a woman's brain.
You have a woman's brain, and is there a MRI or a CAT scan that can actually show people this to be true biologically?
These are actually from studies that were done where they tracked the way that nerves responded in the brain to certain stimuluses and different things.